1950s. These signs were common all around the city because of a system called apartheid. To understand how apartheid ended, we have to go back to when it started. There were nearly 50 years between the start and the end of the system, and a lot had to change in that time. It was made law by the white government in 1948. It kept black and white people separate from each other and discriminated against black people, which meant they were treated unfairly because of the colour of their skin. Black children didn't get to go to the same schools as white children, and black people weren't allowed to use things in public that white people could, like toilets or even benches. They were told where to live, what jobs to have, and the system worked hard to keep black people poorer than white people. If you stepped out of line from any of the rules, you would be punished with violence and could be put into prison for life. Even though most people in South Africa were black, white people made all the rules, and black people weren't allowed to vote. This meant the government got to keep the racist rules in place for a long time. Lots of people protested against the apartheid government, including a political group called the African National Congress, or the ANC. In 1960, the government banned the ANC completely. Around the world, there were protests against South Africa. In 1964, the country wasn't allowed to take part in the Olympics, and this continued until the 1990s. Even though it was banned, the ANC continued to protest against the government. In 1964, a black man called Nelson Mandela was put into prison for life. He had been in charge of the ANC, and lots of people wanted him to lead the country. The government banned pictures of Nelson Mandela and even made speaking his quotes in public illegal. Over the next 20 years, there was lots of pressure on the South African government from inside and outside the country to release Nelson Mandela.
So family, that was a brief summary of apartheid. I thought it would be important for that to be included in this video to basically highlight the hypocrisy that is now coming out of the White House. Donald Trump is claiming that white South Africans are being treated very badly by the government of South Africa. He made a decision to actually cut their funding, and he has claimed that due to the expropriation of land without compensation and South Africa's case with the International Court of Justice, he will continue to cut the funding. They have said that only items that they deem to be necessary would receive some funding, right? And so family, it's really hypocritical of the United States to cite racial discrimination as their cause for cutting the funding. As it said in the video prior to me speaking right now, from 1948 to 1994, white South Africans, the Afrikaners, put in place an entire system of racial segregation. Black South Africans were not able to vote. They were treated poorly and corralled into certain areas of the country that were deemed for natives. Political parties were banned. Political activists were arrested or killed. Student activists were killed by the police under the apartheid regime. Black South Africans had to have a pass and were actually made to live in zones. If you moved outside of your zone, you were arrested. You couldn't sit on the same bench as white South Africans. They had a bench for white people. They had a water fountain for white people, similar to what was taking place in America in the early 1900s, where there was extreme oppression of Black Americans. Well, even while this was taking place, South Africans were not even able to participate in the Olympics. And it's really an extreme oppression if racist white people in America thought that you were going too far. Steve Bannon, who was Trump's former aide, who was his advisor in the previous administration, called white South Africans the most racist people on earth. And this is a quote. He actually said this verbatim. He said that white South Africans are the most racist people on earth. Okay, and here it is. Elon Musk is clearly steering Donald Trump in this direction. Because even when he tries to pronounce Afrikaner, it sounds like a word that he's never heard in a day in his life. Clearly he's never had experience even saying this word. So suddenly Donald Trump is an advocate for the Afrikaner. The Afrikaners didn't have a problem with racial segregation. They instituted racial segregation. What we have today, or what the South Africans have in their current situation, is some improvement, but it's not a full restitution. They still haven't had restorative justice. And this is why the political leaders have taken it upon themselves to right historical wrongs. They cannot continue to allow these people who basically stole the land during apartheid to continue to cultivate and reap the reward of this land. 70% of the arable farmland is currently owned by white South Africans. And so they have convinced Donald Trump that they are the victims and that they don't know where this energy is coming from, when they know for a fact that they did not pay for this land. They basically came there during the era of colonization and basically annexed and stole the land from the native inhabitants. Okay, family. So it is unjust that South Africa should be punished by the United States and have the aid that is used for basically medical services and HIV programs taken away. I think Elon Musk is doing a brazen form of organized crime, because what he's doing is he uses political donation to now force the United States to bully South Africa. And now they are even saying they would want to seek to give Afrikaners asylum in the United States. So is it that they want to expel all of the brown and black immigrants and bring in Afrikaners? Because it's strange that this plan has come within the first 100 days of Donald Trump's White House. We see that now he is inviting Afrikaners out of this country, out of South Africa and into America. And would this precipitate some kind of military action? Or would it even precipitate even more sanctions on South Africa when they safely get all of the white citizens out of South Africa? Would it then cause more suffering for the black residents? Family, it is unjust, and I think other countries should weigh in. Africa needs to be independent and not so dependent on these types of aid programs. I think that has been eroding the sovereignty of Africa for hundreds of years. Family, let me know your thoughts in the comments below about all these dynamics. One love.